All right, let's get rocking and rolling. Sorry, I had a little bit of trouble getting the stream going, which I'm going to check back on in a second. My name is Colin O'Keefe. I am publisher and director of publishing over here at LexBlog. Thanks everybody for taking time to join us today. Excuse me, and I'm joined by Michelle Newblom. Michelle, how's it going today?
It's going good. How about you, Colin?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's a wonderful morning here in Seattle, Washington. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. But yeah, we get a chance to do one of our monthly webinars. Always a treat to walk through some examples and really share some of the education, the things that we see on an ongoing basis. So let's dive in. Let's dive in. Before we get started, of course, welcome back. And in addition to that, a couple resources for you. 99 Park Row, as many of you all know, is the LexBlog company blog. You can get our insights on digital publishing, trends that we're seeing, all of that type of stuff at 99parkrow.com. Also, there's the LexBlog.com resource center, which is actually where we've covered a lot of these post ideas in the past. So if you're looking for more language on them, more post ideas as they come in, other tips and strategies on blogging, head to lexblog.com. In the top right, you'll see a link to our resource center where you can pull up a couple different things, a bunch of different posts that Michelle and other members of the LexBlog team have put together. Finally, This Week in Legal Blogging podcast. That's something Michelle serves as producer on. We talk to some of the best bloggers around on a regular basis. We've had some great ones on there recently. People have succeeded in a number of different ways. So check out This Week in Legal Blogging wherever you get your podcast. Put it on in the background on your smart speaker or what have you. And then second to last, if you want something like this for your lawyers or your team and you're a LexBlog client, don't hesitate to reach out. It's on us. That's what we're here for. I'm not going to hit you up with a big expense after that. But if you're looking at this type of stuff or you're thinking, hey, really would like somebody to talk to our class action team or our privacy team about post ideas or blogging best practices in general or anything else you can think of, just let us know. But if you have ideas that you want us to cover as far as webinars go in the future, we've got a little bit of a schedule that we've put together. But if you have something that you'd like to see us cover that you're curious about, let us know. Always hearing, people sometimes are better at letting us know than putting stuff out there. We get a good sense from what's coming across the wire, but it's always nice to hear from the people that we work with and say, hey, actually, we're hearing more and more about this. Can you talk about that? And we can dive into that. But first, what we have today is blog post ideas. And one of the things that I tell lawyers very frequently, Michelle's heard this in a number of strategy consultations and webinars and stuff of that ilk, is go easy on yourself. The type of stuff that we put out here, like with these post ideas, is meant to make this whole process easier. It's honestly meant to dumb it down a little bit. Because a lot of the time in legal writing, that's what you need to be able to do. A lot of these lawyers are trying to write treatises and white papers and these ideas that spur from their own head. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. And when you're billing at, hundreds of dollars an hour, if not more, that time is extremely valuable. So the time that you're spending on blog posts, you want to do that efficiently, and you want to do it in a way that's easy, that scales, that you can do repetitively time and time again. So I say this with everything, but go easy on yourself. Make this as easy as possible. Nothing that we're going to talk about here or really in any future webinars is meant to make this more difficult. It's like a secret tips and tricks or extra effort things that you can do. It's really just, hey, let's make this a little bit easier. Let's make this something that you can do on a continual basis. Michelle's bad and lead off on our post ideas, but first off, here's what we're going to go through today. Should be pretty obvious, but we're going to walk through a few of our go-to post ideas. Like I mentioned, some of these are in our resource center. We'll also follow up with the slides and the recording and stuff of that ilk, so you have that. We'll take a look at the benefits of each and an example of those posts done really well. Give me 2 seconds to see if we're going to be able to stream this. Nah, we're not doing that right now. All right, we're going to go back to what we're at. We're not going to worry about that. I don't know why our stream is acting up there. Anywho, Michelle, leading us off with one of the classics of blogging. Write about something you found interesting.
Yeah, so this idea of writing about what you find interesting probably sounds simple enough, and it was definitely, what bloggers did in the early days when blogging was like first starting out. So I think that like recently it's kind of been lost just because people are maybe like pushing themselves further and sometimes thinking that they always need to be producing their own original thoughts or providing some sort of in-depth analysis or take. And while these types of posts are still great, we're not saying don't do them. They're not as feasible like all the time when it comes to publishing routinely and often. So just instead, just, one of these posts you can do is just paying attention to the content that you're personally consuming and taking note if there's something you read that you feel like your blog audience would also appreciate. I mean, they're reading your blog for a reason. They're going to trust your insights. So if you find something intriguing, odds are that they're going to as well. So when it comes to formatting this type of post, because you're not going to just drop a link in and say, here, go check this out. You can start out by introducing the source in a paragraph or two. You can even mention where you found it or how you came across it. And definitely do not be afraid to directly input quotes from that source that you're quoting. I always say that you should write these kind of pieces with the assumption in mind that your audience is not going to visit the original article and only read your post, just so that this way you're giving them enough context. So by doing that, insert some block quotes, directly put quotations from that article so they kind of get the gist of what you're talking about. And then here is where providing your own original content comes in, just by honestly sharing why you find this interesting enough to share. If you're referencing a source on a much larger general issue, you can also, bring it back to your specific niche and talk about why this applies to your area. But all in all, I think it's fair that people do like initially want to shy away from these kinds of posts because you don't see them as much anymore. But again, they were the initial backbone of blogging. And yeah, blogging at its core is about listening. And that's exactly what you're doing when you author these pieces. When you go to share and promote your piece, you can give a hat tip to the original source. And by doing that, you can even start to form networks, build relationships and connections this way. Even starting out on like my personal, very new blog, I cited some reputable thought leaders when I had like 30 followers on Twitter, and I went out of my way to like at them, and they would retweet my piece or even give me a follow when they saw that I mentioned them. So that's just a great starting point. And especially if you're already someone with that reputation, that's just a way to keep growing and growing. And then, as Colin mentioned earlier, our own company blog, 99 Park Row, you'll see that we publish these types of posts all the time. They're usually interspersed between company news or community highlights, and they make for just really great pieces to just share like what we think is interesting in digital publishing, why you should find it interesting. And it's just a really unique glimpse too, I think, into the mind of like that blogger. So what I mean by that is when you're explaining your thought process on why you found something interesting, it's almost personal in a sense. And by doing that, your readership can like kind of see you in a different light or start to like understand why you think the way you do. But just getting back to the root of it all, it's an easy post. These require much less effort. They're shorter typically, and they're just easy to push out on a regular, consistent basis.
Yep, absolutely. And that one about shows how you think is so vital. I remember hearing from J. Scott Key. He's moved out of the practice area that he was in, but he wrote on criminal appellate law. And he said, yeah, that was the way he got work was, people developed an understanding for how he processes information, his thinking process. So it's really revealing in that sense. Next up, we have one that's really closely associated, but I think goes maybe a step farther from what you're traditionally looking at. But something I think law blogs can do a better job of, particularly once you get into large law where you're really focused in on responding to things. That's one of the things that I say a lot is a lot of law blogs are really reactionary. Last month, we talked about the need to be proactive and stuff of that ilk. And this is in that vein. You don't want to just respond to litigation, legislation, regulation, and just push out the same stuff that everybody else is pushing out. In your casual news consumption, if you're taking a look at in the morning, you might be checking the daily news, whether it's New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, another trade publication, or just stuff you're looking at for fun on Facebook or what have you. Bring something like that back to the field of law. It can be as simple as what blank means for blank law, what this development means for privacy law, what this cultural thing means for privacy law, what does Omicron mean for environmental law, less people traveling, what does it mean for privacy law? Are we going to see more clear stuff all over the place? Probably. There's so many different things that can be pulled back to your blog, and it can be, like I mentioned on here, it can be a trend that's big or small, and it need not be that obvious. It doesn't have to be some super, super, super obvious thing. It can be, some trend that's going on in the world. If it's, for some stuff, it's a remote working. Everybody had a post on remote working, which I think is interesting. And you want to write those, but bring those stories back to area law. It doesn't have to be so obvious. And it can really be similar to the thing you found interesting. Always write why it was interesting or what it means, because you want to show that level of thinking, that creativity. As a lawyer, a core part of lawyer's job is to identify risks and opportunities. That's what your clients trust you for, is keeping you aware of kind of the environment and the risks and the associated opportunities. So if you can demonstrate that your eyes are on the horizon and can see, okay, this is what this could mean for that, this is what this could mean for this, it can be really, really important. I mean, even yesterday's news, this is probably even more on the nose and less creative, but you see that, the Senate is supposedly shelving the Build Back Better Act. What does that mean for the environment? What does it mean for employment? What does it mean for privacy? What does it mean for, last mile transportation? What does it mean for consumer finance? It's like we got, probably 60 posts out of just that one development. And I don't know, it can kind of be a fun game to play. I'll play it on strategy consultations where I'll open up the front page of the Washington Post, New York Times, and say, hey, let's find a story and apply it to this area of law. And you usually can be able to do that. Here's why it's a good idea to do that. We mentioned this last month. Ultimately, you're trying to write a publication that people read. And if you want to have people read your stuff, you got to write stuff that people want to read. Writing about interesting subjects will get people to read them because it's interesting. Also, it gets you involved in the broader conversation. It creates more engaging content that's, you're going to get more traction on social and elsewhere if you're writing on stuff that is at least applicable to the everyday world, stuff that people have heard of. That isn't to say that you should only write on this type of thing. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination, but honestly, it's also more fun to write about sometimes the bigger trends or big issues and tie them back than it is otherwise. No guarantees, that you're going to, you write one post about a big trend and you're going to get hit up by the New York Times or anything like that. But the media loves this type of thing. This is the type of thing when they're trying to find out the law around a big popular subject, or they see this bounced around, they can reach out on it. I have a couple examples, well, one off the top of my head, but Dan Schwartz is always like the king of, hey, here's this new thing. Let me write about what it means for employment law. So we took a look at, hey, employers, Facebook. So yesterday, welcome to the TikTok world, gets into what TikTok is, some examples of issues that could arise and stuff like that. I think he always prides himself on being one of the first people to write about a new subject. That's a good one. And then another example pulled from the past that I can recall is, there's a lawyer in Texas, I can't recall his name. He wrote on tax issues, and it makes me feel so old. But Johnny Manziel, when he was in college, famed Texas A&M quarterback, supposedly got in trouble for signing paid autographs when he shouldn't have signed paid autographs, especially as a college athlete. This is before name, image, likeness, and stuff like that. But what he wrote about, and what nobody would probably think to write about, is, hey, he could get busted for tax issues if he's signing autographs for money and not reporting the income that he's making off of that. He wrote about this subject. It was cited on NFL.com, and I think Reporter reached out to him and talked to him about it. And, he's probably not providing tax advice to Johnny Manziel or other athletes who are doing legally iffy, or at least amateur athletics iffy things. But, it's one of those things that gets your name out there and it gets you involved in the broader conversation. Next up is our year in review. Is that you, Michelle, or is that me?
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, so for your interview post, obviously this is a very timely kind of post, and now is the perfect time to jump on this idea if you haven't already. And I think it's like pretty safe to say, like, everyone can recognize, especially recently in the past few years, like, people love these digestible, unique posts. I mean, you've seen everybody sharing their Spotify Wrapped at the end of the years. And I've seen, like, especially this year, other companies like Reddit and Twitch and then Snapchat last year are also jumping on this trend and just giving their consumers this packaged, personalized data that just everyone loves to see. And then especially, if you're running short on time heading into the holidays, but you need to squeeze out a couple more posts, this is sure to be a great one. And we're actually working on our own right now, so stay tuned for that. But there are a few different ways you can approach this type of kind of like wrap up post. So one is to take a look at your specific industry. You can give a summary of everything important that happened in the past year. Look at any of the big laws that passed, any big court cases, big stories, big trends, and just break them down a little accompanying commentary. Everyone likes reminders like, oh, wow, that was from this year. That feels like that was 5 years ago, especially in these times, but that's always a great idea. And then another way you can do it is by making it more personal to your specific blog. Like, what were the biggest stories that you put out this year? What were your most read posts? Which ones gained the most traction? Things like that. Because you are the only one who has access to this kind of data, this kind of numbers. So that's just a way I think you can really personalize it too. And that's what you see the big companies do as well in some way or another. So that's just another way you can format it. And that I think is an interesting one too, especially if you have more of a niche type blog. And also, just like from the get-go, the idea of wrapping up an entire year of legal news can definitely sound daunting, but it does not need to. You can team up with other writers on your blog. You can even write most of it as bullets if that kind of style suits you. And then plus another upside, you could follow this post up with one in January, say, that's making predictions for the year to come. So 2 easy, but still interesting and unique posts to close out the year, get it started. Just we're giving those to you. It's a freebie, not too hard to do. And then with this post, like why it's a great idea, some of the success you can get out of it is, you're more likely to appear in searches, as many people will be directly inputting into Google, what were the biggest stories in XYZ this year. It's a very search friendly post. And it can be also used as a helpful outreach tool. And it definitely shows that you know what you're talking about. People are really going to trust the person who has crafted this knowledgeable resource for sure. Because you wouldn't be able to write it in the first place if you didn't know what you were talking about. And then also, the great thing about this post too, and again, what you just see all like the huge companies do is you can just repurpose it into so many different mediums. It can just be consumed in so many different ways. For example, if you host a podcast, you could have an entire episode discussing exactly what you talked about, what you learned even putting together this post. If you host a webinar series like we do, it can be the topic for one going into the new year, and you could turn it into a newsletter. But just again, on that outreach, I just think that's a great point to hit on, that it's a really like perfect opportunity, especially at the end of the year, to reach out to clients or potential clients, send them to them, just be like, hey, I think you would appreciate this. Like, if you're curious what happened in this realm this year, it's just a great resource for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, as a sneak peek, like Michelle mentioned, we're working on our 2021 year in review, and our January webinar is going to be on that piece that we put together. So take advantage of that. This is one of those things, I think it applies to so many pieces of blog content, but this is a great example where, hey, if you're putting it together and you're putting the effort in, stretch that effort out, maximize it in as many different ways as possible. If you've taken the time to write this, you've got a webinar, you've got presentations, you might as well, hey, spend, I don't know, $1,000 or send it off to your in-house shop and have them turn it into a fancy PDF, print it out, mail it around. It's a great opportunity and great, outreach tool, as Michelle mentioned as well. Next up, we've got another classic, and this one, I believe, is one Michelle's going to walk us through.
Yes. So yeah, this is one of my favorite kind of posts, especially just to read from our community, because it's definitely, a 2 birds, 1 stone type of piece. Not only is it, I think, one of the easiest ones to publish on a regular basis, it's also going to be one of the most helpful posts that you can offer your readers and your audience. Chances are that, the clients or the potential clients that are choosing to go to your blog and read your blog are doing so because they need more insight on that topic that you write about. And maybe they don't know where to start. Like, they're not even sure what they're looking for. By writing this type of post, you can do the hard work for them by answering the most frequently asked questions that you hear on a day-to-day basis. And if they're ones that you hear all the time, you probably just already have an answer ready to go off the top of your head. So just make it easier for yourself, honestly, too, by putting it into writing. then this way you just have a permanent evergreen resource that you can send to people whenever that question arises, which in turn is going to make you look really good because you just have something, not even just an answer for them ready to go, but like an actual solid piece that you can send them. So if you haven't already, I would recommend just starting to keep a list of the questions that you notice pop up all the time. And when you have maybe 4 or 5 that you want to really go into depth, give a detailed answer to, boom, blog post. Again, it's just one of the easiest ones to do, and people are always going to have questions. They're never going to stop having questions. So you can author this type of post countless times. Even if there's one large looming question that pops up, you can dedicate a post to that single question too. And then especially if any changes happen in your industry, for example, like with COVID-19, obviously, when all of these different types of areas were thrown into disarray, a lot of people were seeking guidance on how certain protocols applied to them. So if something big like that, hopefully not as big as that ever happens, that you know people are going to ask you about, you can honestly just beat them to the punch and write it up even before that question gets asked. You probably have a good feel on what your clients need to know, sometimes even better than them. So you can take advantage of that and just help them out by answering their question even before it gets asked. And then again, talking about like search friendly, put the question in the title because it will, first of all, just let your readers know exactly what your post is going to be talking about. And it's also a really search friendly option. And you can see the example Colin has from, that you had from Jeff Nowak on FMLA Insights. Like, yeah, that's like a perfect example of a title. And because if the title of your blog post is exactly like word for word what people are inputting into Google, it's going to be a lot easier for new readers to find you too, not even the ones that are already aware of your blog. And then just another thing this can help with is making your content more readable for a general audience. I think especially for newer bloggers, it can be like hard to stray away from wanting to write with legal terms and use like legal writing, but you just simply can't do that really with these types of posts, not if you want your audience to, understand you at least. So they're good practice for when you tackle other posts that are going to be more relevant to like legal news or something, and you're going to have a better feel of how to write for your target audience just by getting used to writing these types of posts. So just to reiterate and drive it home, I would say this is one of, if not the easiest post to write, and at the same time, it's sure to be helpful and well received by your audience.
As I get the slide updated to be what it's supposed to have there, bear with me, everybody. Yeah, this one is so clutch for a number of different reasons. Jeff is kind of the pro at these. If you're ever like, hey, I need post ideas. I've heard questions are a good one. How do you do this? Go to fmlainsights.com and scroll. And even if you're not in employment law, he is the king of doing this. And it's just, they're so helpful in a number of different ways. And I'd say, in addition to what Michelle mentioned, don't lean on them for like personal outreach and communications as well. So here's something that's really in the weeds, but say you're trying to get a certain client that you work with to subscribe to the blog. And they have a question. They reach out, they have a question. It's a question that a bunch of other people have asked. Write that up as a blog post. And then when you go to respond to their email, and you can treat these like emails. I mean, you're obviously not going to have sensitive information and their exact situation on the blog. But if it's something like, hey, what paid leave do I have to provide for COVID-19 vaccine or testing? How does that work? Write it up. And then when if the GC had a question or somebody had a question, the HR pro had, a client had a question, send this over to them and say, hey, I actually answered this on the blog. By the way, subscribe. You'll get all this type of stuff on a regular basis. And also, it makes those emails in the future a lot easier when the next person asks this, and you can say, hey, yep, already wrote it up. Let me send you a link to the post that I already wrote on this. So that's one of those things that can get this out there really far. It just, you always want to fall back on that personal communication. Don't overlook that because, getting those hits from search or what have you, that's really nice. It's great. People will read it, it might eventually develop a following over time, but quality is better than quantity. So if you can use a post like this to connect with a client or potential client in a very deliberate manner, go ahead and do that. But this is a nice fallback. This is a personal favorite of mine. And this one's me, right, Michelle? Or yeah, probably. That's what I thought. Bear with me, everybody. Interview posts. This is a classic, and it seems like it's kind of more complex, or at least more advanced. And it is to a certain extent, but at the same time can be really low effort. And it's really as simple as ask someone in your practice area or adjacent to it if they have time to answer a few questions. And it can be as simple as that. Hey, you got 5 minutes to answer a few questions? Or hey, you mind if I shoot 3 questions your way via email? We'd love to run it on the blog. It can be general counsel, industry executives, referral sources. Everybody likes to be told that they're smart, or inferred that they're smart. Or I guess infer is not the right word. Conveyed that they're smart is probably the other way. So if you're like, hey, when you reach out and you say, do you have time to answer a few questions to put on my blog? What you're effectively saying to that person is, I think you are smart, and I want to show other people how smart you are. So if you're looking to like build or strengthen a relationship, this is a great way to do it. And then it's also a great way to demonstrate to your clients that you have these relationships. And it can be done in multiple different ways. And like I mentioned initially, hey, just reaching out. You got a couple minutes. If I send you 3 questions via email, you think you could write maybe 2 or 3 sentences on each one, just kind of on what you're seeing in the industry, or what you anticipate for 2022, or what the Build Back Better Act needs for blank, or it can really be as simple as that. It can be an email. And then honestly, all you're doing is copying and pasting. If you want to do it a little bit more advanced, you can do Zoom or a Google Hangout, record it. And then if you want to turn it into writing as well, Otter.ai is a tool that does easy transcription. They give you a certain amount of hours when you're doing a demo. Just create a bunch of new accounts and you can get as many transcriptions as you want. Little pro tip, if you have Gmail, so say my email address is colin@lexblog.com. If I do Colin +Otter@lexblog.com, Otter will read that as a new email address, and everything that's sent to that email address will go to my regular inbox, but then I can do Colin +Otter1, Otter2, whatever. A little bit of a George Costanza-esque hack, but it can be nice if you're looking to just keep things moving and not have to bounce an expense off of somebody else. But these posts can be done, again, so many different ways. I would say even if you're going to do it via video or podcast or something like that, to take some of it and put it in print, just because I think a lot of people still do like to read. I mean, even think of your own consumption habits. If you're coming across something passively, like on the bus, or maybe you're watching television, or even if you're in the middle of your workday, it's not super likely that you're going to set aside the time to put it on in audio format. Thank you all here, though, for taking the time to listen to us. But, you know, a lot of times you're going to just keep going. But still, this one can be really easy in terms of the actual writing that you have to do. Like I mentioned, if it's an email interview, the only original writing that you have to do is an intro paragraph about who you're talking to, and then your questions, which are copied and pasted from your original email exchange. It's also nice because it brings new perspectives to the blog, particularly perspectives of people who aren't lawyers. And they may be looking at the same type of stuff, but they're looking at it from a different angle. They might be looking at it from, you know, in this instance, it's a fiduciary. I saw another great example in the past. An advertising law blog reached out to, I think, the CMO at Sony. So you get these perspectives on the space from industry folks that you just wouldn't get otherwise. And it's just, like I mentioned, it's an outstanding tool for networking. It's just really, really, really good. The most on the nose example I can think of for this is, so this is a way back. There was an attorney who wrote a blog on the smart grid. And this is like the most jumping the shark literal example of this. But I recall she told the story of being at an industry event, and she goes up and she talks to, I think, some of the regulators and people in the industry were talking at this in-person event. And after the session is over, she walks up to the front and asks this person, hey, you know, do you have time to answer a couple of cool questions? I write this blog at Smart Grid Legal News, I believe it was called. Do you have time to answer a few questions? And they, of course, oblige because it just takes a quick second. Well, one of her clients was also at the meeting, and the client walks up, and the attorney finds themselves in a unique position of going, hey, a regulator, here's so-and-so who happens to be my client, here's this regulator. And again, that's the most on the nose literal example, but still, that's kind of what you're going for is, hey, I'm showing people that I'm kind of a mover and a shaker in this space. And it's one of those things that goes really far. It makes for great content. But like I mentioned again and again, really, really easy. And also it can be a series. Get in the habit of doing these, mix it in. You can call it 5 questions, 3 questions. You can call it, come up with a nice series name, get it out there, mix it in. And then all of a sudden you might have a free post every month or every week or something along those lines. Here's a great example from Downey Brand Trust on Trial. Where did we go? There we go. This is a really good one. This is the blog on trust and estate litigation. You have an interview with the fiduciary. And as you can imagine, like this could be a potential referral source. You want to keep that relationship strong. You want to put them out there. And it's beneficial for both parties to say, hey, you might want to work with this guy. And this guy might say, hey, you want to work with these guys? It's a great opportunity. And you can see it's really as simple as how this is formatted. What led you to this? What do you do in a typical work day? How's COVID-19 change things? They write out their own answer. And this is probably even on the longer side in terms of what you'll see. But yeah, this is a really, really good one. I'll show that actually other one while I have it. Remember, I had this pulled up earlier. Bear with me as we go on a little adventure here. But this is from way back in the day. This got me on these a long, long time ago. Madison Avenue Insights from Ronald Urbach from way back in 2013. But trade shows in the digital age, a discussion with Sony Computer Entertainment. He's got an SVP at Sony Brand Marketing and getting into, hey, here's what this looks like, quick questions, quick paragraph. That's all there is to it. And it really can be really low effort. And it's a great opportunity to network with folks who you might not have networked with otherwise. So back to where we were at, we got one more for you that you can fall back on. This one is honestly, I think, have you seen anybody else do this post besides the one example that I'm about to show, Michelle?
No, I think we're still.
But still, it's one of those things that forces you to do something. It's called an ABC series. It's more advanced, it's more long-term, but you can do the ABCs of blank. It can be your area of law, it can be a piece of legislation. And the goal is to create a bit of a long-term blogging habit. I mean, you can be set for months if you get on track doing this. And it's a nice thing that kind of puts you on track. I remember hearing from somebody that a good way to be optimistic is to write about something you're grateful for every single day and start with the ABCs and work your way through it. And that keeps you on track. Well, same for kind of a blog post is, hey, this will keep you on track. You don't have to do it every day, but you can come up with a nice ABC series of, hey, here are the ABCs of blank. It could be ABCs of family law. It could be the ABCs of HIPAA. It could be the ABCs of the California Consumer Privacy Act. ABCs of the NLRB, ABCs of SCOTUS. There's so many different things that you can do in your practice area. It could be the general practice area as a whole, or it could be more narrow. In that realm, I'll show you the example that we've got here and how this was applied. And I think it was just so great. But why it's smart, like I mentioned, it creates consistency. It can be excellent for just starting a blog. So if you're just looking to build a foundation and get on the right track, this is a good way to do it. It creates a deep body of content. I mean, there are a lot of blogs that don't write 26 posts in their first year. So if you're getting off on the right foot, you're trying to build a body of content, trying to get stuff out there, do that. This will get you on the right track, kind of forces you to think. Also, as you get started, it'll probably force you to create a little bit of an outline and inadvertently probably a bit of an editorial calendar as well. But same as some of the other things that we mentioned, this can be repurposed in a couple of different ways. I mean, this could be a webinar, could be a printed report, could be a mailing that you send out. It's really cool. And again, as I kind of joke with Michelle there, this isn't something that I've seen on a bunch of blogs by any stretch of the imagination. This is honestly an idea we picked up from this series, from Covington and from Kevin Polencar's there. But it is, I'll show you what it looks like. It is really cool. The United States New Nationally Determined Contribution and the ABCs of the American Jobs Plan. So they were doing all stuff on the American Jobs Plan. So if I open up the category for the American Jobs Plan, you can see they got some stuff that's a little bit more recent. But as I work back through it, zeroing in on net zero emissions, that's your Z right there, net zero emissions. As far as why, yellow school buses and diesel electrification. So there's a little bit of creativity to it. Yeah, you know, it's not always the easiest to find an X, but I think that we'll let that slide there. Extreme weather and the need for climate resiliency, win-win solutions for clean water from Wisconsin to Washington, D.C. They have a little bit of fun with it, and you can see what these posts look like. To get a sense for timing, that's actually something I'm curious of. So this finished up in July, and it started. I can't remember if they did this every day. I don't think they did it every day, but they did. They knocked it out in a lot of not too long. But this is something that stretched over. It's going to look like. Where's our A? There it is right there. So it went from April all the way to July. And those aren't necessarily the easiest months to get blogging done. A lot of summer months there, we are grinding it out in the office. But hey, you want 2 months of content or something like that? ABCs of what have you? ABCs of trust, ABCs of ABCs of Gavin Newsom's tenure as California governor, ABCs of blank. You can get on a nice little rhythm there. Those are some of the staples that we have. There's so many different ones we could talk about, but I wanted to deliver some of the fundamentals. Probably a lot of these you've heard before, but again, I can't say it enough. Go easy on yourself. Tell your lawyers to go easy on themselves. That not everything has to come out of your own brain. Not everything has to be a treatise or a personal essay that you just came up with on your own. A lot of times you can fall back on, here's this interesting thing I saw and why I thought it was interesting. Hey, here's what this big development today means for blank. Hey, here's Urban Meyer got canned last night. Is he going to get fired for cause or not for cause? What does that mean for this, that, or the other? There's a lot of interesting stuff in that realm. And I'll open it up to any questions that people have. I try to keep this under an hour, only about 30, 45 minutes. But if people have questions or if they have ideas, ones that we missed that you love falling back on, let us know. We'd love to hear about it, whether it's in chat or elsewhere. But otherwise, as I wait on that, I will say our next webinar, as I alluded to earlier, we're practicing what we preach, is going to be on 2021 in review, where we'll take a look at trends in legal blogging, advancements in digital publishing, try to gather up some observations from people like you, bloggers, legal marketers, lawyers, everybody like that. That'll be Wednesday, January 19th at 10 a.m. Head to register. We can register at lexblog.com/webinar. We'll get you in there. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, fire them our way. Again, if you want us to put something like this together for your lawyers or your firm or just you, and you're a LexBlog client, reach out. It's on us. That's what you work with us for. We'll make sure that we'll take care of you. But yeah, this webinar will be the recording, notes, slides will be up on 99parkrow.com. We'll get that up there. And then since we were having a little bit of issues with the streaming, we'll probably record it, stream it out again. So if you want to catch it again or send it to somebody else, it'll be up on our social channels. If not later today, then tomorrow as well. But yeah, anybody have any questions, anything we can share, anything we can talk about in a little bit more in depth? And again, the slides will go out, and then the examples that we talked about will be in there as well. And not seeing any questions right now, so I'm going to stop sharing. And like I mentioned, if you do have questions, you think of something later, you want to reach out to us, just Colin at lexblog.com, Colin at lexblog.com. Heather, thank you. Appreciate it for joining us. You're more than welcome. We're always happy to help on this type of stuff. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Colin at lexblog.com, Michelle at lexblog.com. That'll go right to us. We're not hard to reach. And if you have questions, check it out. But if not, we'll see you in January. I hope you will join us then. Michelle, it was a great time as always.
Yes, this was awesome.
All right, take care, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Bye all.
Bye all.